we'd open with a question today that actually has something to do with what we'll be talking about on the episode.
What?
Not by accident.
Are we feeling okay?
No, not at all. But that's a completely different issue. Tom.
Hello.
Have you ever dated someone that you've worked with?
Dated someone that I've worked with.
Had a crush on someone that you've worked with?
Yes, I'm sure a crush and mayhaps a date here or there, but I think during that, when you're aware that you're working with someone, that you've got your eye on them, I think instinctively I was like, this can't work out well, I think. So I think I half-heartedly pursued it, but logic and sort of my brain talked me out of it, if that makes sense. So no, I've never dated, I've never been in a workplace and across from me I've seen my partner, to call them. I've never had that experience.
You and your lovely lady are both in the performing sphere, but that's not quite the same, hey?
No, and since we've dated, we've worked together on projects, but no, not in a, I suppose, a typical workplace.
Not in a real workplace.
No, nowhere with stakes.
Well, I have, and it was not great, Tom.
No.
It was not great.
Are you going to...
No, look, I feel like that's been covered before on previous episodes. So have a look at Emma and the Gaslit Friend would be a nice coverage of that particular relationship. But today we've actually brought somebody on to chat about exactly that, dating in the workplace. So with us today we have Judith Beck. Hi, Judith.
Hello, how are you?
So good. So lovely to see you again. Now, Judith and I recently recorded an episode of Insight on SBS about love at work. And there were quite a few things that we didn't get to talk about on air on the TV show because all their lovely romantic partnerships were in like the sports industry or like the theatre industry where, it's not quite as difficult to date somebody. But today we're going to talk about Judith, and she's written a book called No Sex at Work, which I love the title of, and just kind of what it's like dating in the corporate sphere. Now, Judith, can you tell us a little bit about yourself first?
Sure. So my background is banking when I was young and when I first started out. And then I ran an executive search firm for over 25 years. Wow. And I also ran a women's organization, Financial Executive Women, for 7 years. I founded that and ran that. And then I passed that business on to the next generation. That's when I wrote my book. And then in the last year, started a podcast for careers, and, Every Step podcast. And that's really where all my information comes from. It's just
fantastic.
Experience. That's where all our information comes from on this podcast as well. It's through experience and the different things that we've encountered over the, nearly 4.5 years of doing this particular podcast on dating and people's issues regarding dating.
And quite a few plugs there for Judith's. There's a book and a podcast to go check out.
We will put all of these in the show notes. So
Judith, the book is titled No Sex at Work. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And is that a blanket rule? No sex at work, full stop. No, not even once a little dalliance, a little dalliance.
Well, when I wrote it, the book, a big part of the book is about being an individual at work. No sex at work, meaning how do you get from A to B in your career as an individual rather than all the labels that we get put on us. And getting there is about your skill levels and your capabilities. But there's also a big section in there about relationships at work and that part of it as well. And it's funny because people think the whole book's about no sex at work.
No.
Well, my experience of dealing with people in the corporate world, and Elizabeth's right, when we were on the show, we saw a lot of people that were not in the traditional corporate career ladder, the different power struggles, that types of thing. And it's quite different. So I was doing executive search in the financial services industry, and that's headhunting people and getting them out of their senior roles and putting them in another organization. Now, we don't advertise for positions like that. So you have to really build relationships with people for the long term, and you find out a lot of stuff, and they tell you a lot of stuff. And all the things that they told me over those 25 years is the reason that chapter is in there. Because like I say in the book, if it was me, I wouldn't do it. Like, it's danger zone.
And if it was me and I had my time again, I wouldn't do it.
You wouldn't do it. You wouldn't. And having said that, like when I was at uni and I was working in retail, retail wasn't going to be my career. So I was doing so of course you go into your job and you meet people there, because that is not what you plan on doing the rest of your life. It's like a part-time job where you're going to uni to make money. That's a job. It's a means to an end. Mm-hmm. But when you decide on what your career is, then that's your passion. And that's what you want to be known for, and you want to have a reputation, you want to build something. So why would you screw it up by having a bad relationship that then gets out all over the place? Because, back when I was young, if you had a bad relationship, if somebody at work, it stayed in that little neighborhood, it stayed in that little company, and no one knew about it all over the place because there wasn't the internet and all that different stuff. Mm-hmm. But now information travels very quickly. And if somebody has a bad relationship, it's going to be known. And so I would have people. So I'd have people say things like, I would do reference checks, and the referee would say something like, "Oh yeah, he was a bit of a player with the girls."
Ooh,
yeah,
right. That's it. He's out. That was enough for me to go, now there's problems, because the referee didn't really want to go into too much more detail. Yeah. But those and they would never know why they didn't get the role. They would never know. So bad reputation would follow, and they would never know that something like that would follow them.
Right. And so there are people out in the world who are not getting jobs or careers or offers, but and they don't know why. That's because information has ran ahead of them through recruiters, etc. And so, all right, interesting. Okay.
Everyone talks about everything. It's not just about the work that you put out. It's about the person that you present up front in the workplace, in a corporate atmosphere.
Yes. Yeah. And also too, if you are the manager, and you let's say you're both single, and that's okay. You're both single. You're the manager, and you might fancy somebody in your team. Well, maybe they don't fancy you, and then all of a sudden you start flirting with them or giving them more attention than someone else. Well, then that's harassment. That could be taken as, or maybe you ask them out, and they say no, and then you go, okay, fine. No, I accept your no. But then something happens where they don't get the next promotion that they thought that they should get. Then all of a sudden they're going to think they didn't get it because they turned down the boss or there's all kinds of things. And I always kind of look at it like, there's a lot of people out there. Why do you need to mess it up by going?
Look, to be crass, pretty much I usually say these days, don't shit where you eat.
Yeah, that's it.
If this is the people that are that are paying you your paycheck and allowing you to live, don't mess up something in the workplace. Now, Judith, we often hear a lot of examples of people who are, for example, as we just brought up, in positions of power over, and wanting to date subordinates. But what do you think about people who are perhaps on the same level and keen on each other and wanting to start a relationship?
Well, I think the thing is that one, you got to find out what the company's rules and regulations are. Mm-hmm. If there is somebody in your team and you both want to go out on date or whatever, you're the same age and same level, find out what the rules are. Mm-hmm. First, let HR know, find out but also too, I still think you need to be really cautious, because even if you do get in a relationship with someone and it doesn't work, it's going to be very awkward.
Yes, firsthand can tell you yes. Like when my ex and I broke up, we started getting together. We just told everybody in the office about it, and for a really stupid reason, about 3 months later, we broke up. And this is probably about 2 weeks after we'd told everybody. So I had to go back into the office after we'd had our first holiday away. And people were like, how was the holiday? And I was like, well, actually, I'm single now. And we had a very small office at that time as well. So even though we were both on the same level, his desk was right next to the printer. So I would have to go every day when I was printing something out and stand right next to him. And he was acting like nothing was wrong and my heart was breaking. It was awkward and awful. And we got back together because classic Liz Best makes stupid decisions.
Do you, Judith, Liz said they got back together. Do you think they got back together because they were in the same workplace 5 times a week?
Oh, look, I think people get back together. Sometimes it takes more than one time to break up. And you might be, thinking, okay, you know how they always say, you forget the bad stuff. Like you forget the bad until you get back together, and then you go, oh yeah, that's right, that's why I did it.
Yeah.
No, it's like how many times you have to try to give up smoking before you throw that packet away. It takes a while, but eventually you'll get there.
And I do think that if I hadn't been in the same office with him Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, I would have just cut him out of my life like a normal person. Right. I would have, just because I wasn't having that incidental contact, I probably wouldn't have made the decision to step back into that again. But I do honestly think that when we moved to another state, and I do think that us being together did hurt my chances at some potential jobs at my new workplace, to be honest with you. Is that something that comes up often, that potentially people in relationships hurt their own chances if they're dating someone as a colleague?
Well, if somebody gets promoted and the other person doesn't, and they're in the same team, then who knows if one person's not confident enough, then they might get jealous, or, they might think, well, how come I didn't get it? Or, and that could cause friction. I just think that if you're dating somebody within your own team that's at your same level, you still need to consider somebody, transferring to another department, or it's actually for your own benefit too, because every time you go to lunch or go out and see a client and you go together, because usually in teams you might have to go see clients, people are going to go where they're going. Where are they going? Oh, they were a little bit longer, gone a little bit longer this time. Did they really go to that meeting? Then you get the people who are trying to throw someone under the bus. So you got to worry about those people too. So it's kind of like, why give them ammunition? I mean, it's your career. And if you're really passionate about your career, you don't want to put barriers in front of you if you don't have to. So I think it's kind of like, think it through. I mean, I remember that couple that was on the show. One of them left after 3 months and went to another area. Did you catch that?
I did. And I think that speaks to what I said on the show as well, which was basically like, there's always, in my opinion, when you date someone at work, there's always an end date. Now, whether that's the end of the job or the end of the relationship, who's to say? But you've got to, one or the other's got to give at some point.
Yes, exactly right. And, there's also, and I do write some examples of this in the book, where it's not just the relationship, the long-term relationship of dating somebody. The other thing that is a big no-no is, going out with someone once or twice, or just hooking up with someone. So at a Christmas party or at a conference, I cannot even begin to count how many people have ruined their career at the Christmas party or at a conference. And what's involved all the time? Alcohol. Alcohol is always involved. And it's like, what did I do? And, or people saw them or whatever within their teams. And, it's a big risk for companies, a big risk. It's a big risk for the people. And also, people have cameras now. They have cameras. They have. So, and there's, it sounds terrible, but there's a lot of people out there that would have no problem taking a picture of someone who doesn't look in their best place, and ruining their career.
I think there's a trap that a lot of people can fall into, and it's an assumption that the people at your workplace are your friends or they're there for you. But no, not everyone, like people want your position, people want your pay, people want you out of the company. So, you know, you go to the Christmas party, don't drink 12 sambucas and then, you know, get on the tables. You know, there is
I've never
there.
understood the people that do drink. Like, I get that it's an open bar and you're like, yay, alcohol or whatever, but I've always been too scared to drink it at Christmas parties. Like, I'm terrified.
Sage wisdom advice there.
That is a good rule of thumb.
Yeah.
And I used to say, because I had consultants that were in different states, and I used to always, and we had to go to conferences and client things, and I would say to the consultants, it's work. This is work.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
We're going to a conference, or we're going to, you know, whatever client. It's not a fun, get drunk as much as you want and have a good time. This is all about work. And I would say at conferences, I'd go walk in, because these financial services companies would have these big cocktail events. Mm. And I'd say, go to the cocktail event, walk around, say hello to all your clients, get out of there by 9 o'clock. Because after 9 o'clock, they won't remember that you've been there. And you don't need it.
Nothing good at work ever happens after 9 o'clock.
Nothing, exactly right. And, you know, and the next day we would hear all these stories of people who made idiots of themselves, or they got in an argument with someone, there was a punch up, or they got too drunk or whatever.
I was going to say, Judith, or ask, there has to be a horror story, a dating related or a workplace sex story that you've heard over your career that must make your skin crawl.
Oh, there's heaps. There's, you know, and there's the, you know, at the time when I was writing the book, there was a story going out. It was quite a big one. And in my book, I call him Alvin.
Yes, good. We like an alias. Yep.
Because that was the only name I could think of that surely nobody else has. Right? I go, okay, his name's going to be Alvin. And Alvin was in a senior role.
Yep.
And Alvin thought it would be a good idea to send pictures.
Oh, yes. Fantastic.
Yes, to somebody in his team who really wasn't giving not even a girlfriend. You know, I think they had dated, but no longer a girlfriend.
Right.
Anyway, Alvin lost his job.
Yes.
Unsurprising.
And I thought to myself, oh, for God's sakes, would you not have the sense enough to know that that's not a good idea? Like, how does someone get, and I'm thinking, but what happens is when people get into these positions of power, they actually start thinking that they're invincible.
Yes.
And obviously Alvin thought that. Well, he wasn't, and he lost his job, and I don't think he's even in the country anymore. But you know, Bill Clinton couldn't get away with it.
That's right.
You know, and he's got security and everything else. So if he can't get away with what does anybody think else, or why would anybody else think they could? And so, you know, you hear those stories all the time, and it's just like, God, don't you learn? I mean, it's been in the paper, it's all the things that you see, and people are still doing it.
I just don't get why anybody puts anything in writing or sends it in a text. Like, I'm not trying to advocate, hey, perverts, here's how you do your job better. Do it in person. But, like...
That's right. They have to...
Don't be so stupid to put anything into technology in any way, shape or form. My goodness.
Messenger pigeon. That's the way to wait.
Oh, my God. But also, call me old-fashioned. I don't want to see your pictures.
No.
I don't care if I'm dating you.
That's not old-fashioned at all.
Seems to be a fairly common complaint. Yes.
I'm just like, I don't understand what possesses people to go, you know what someone wants to see, despite them giving me no indication that they would like to see that at any point in time in our relationship, junk in a text message.
And that's kind of out in the wild in the world. But we're here talking with Judith about not just a workplace, because there's different, like a workplace is different to your career. Like, this is the thing, the career, the thing you've been studying for, driving for, working towards for all these years. Yes, momentum, do it. And then you in like 2 minutes, you undo all that work because you want to shag someone in the closet. Yeah.
It's ridiculous. And you think, God, like you said, you go through all that hard work, and then one moment is going to bring down everything, and you think, where's that common sense? Obviously they didn't. And a company, anybody that does that, so anybody in an organization, they got to go, I got to let that person go, because that's just an unbelievable decision that they would have made. And we've always said this, and Liz, you just said it. Don't put anything anywhere that you don't want on the front page of the newspaper.
Yeah,
it's a way of living. And when you're having a relationship at work, people are going to know about it. There's going to be more things that are going to get around a lot quicker. It's going to go through. If it doesn't work, then that's worse. If it is going to work and you can't help it, well, then go through protocol. Go through a protocol, and there has to be a intent to do everything right. And it has to be like, we're not going to go out to lunch together. We're not going to, when we talk to each other at work, it's going to be normal at work. There's no sweetie honey, and throwing kisses across the room. Right?
Well, that's what I was going to ask next. Like, surely like abstinence isn't the only answer, because sometimes you might feel like you've met your person. But what are some tools and mechanisms that you can put in place to make sure that these kinds of relationships don't damage your career?
Question. Yeah, one is discussing it with your boss and saying, I'm dating John, and are there any reasons? Because sometimes there can be a conflict of interest. Sometimes some companies will have it as a rule that you cannot date somebody within the own organ. So find it out, bring it out in the open. Once you know, you might not do it your first, second, or third date, but once you know it's going to be a relationship, then let it be known. But you would ask HR before your first date, because you need to know the rules. But I think the thing is then you have to be very much aware of how you're being perceived. And so you don't do it's work. So you don't treat your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your partner, whoever, any different in that environment than you would anyone else. And if you think that way all the time, then that will help. What you do on the weekend or after work, well, then that's your own business. But what you do during the week is going to impact your career if you don't do it right.
And do you think as much as our own time is technically our own time, what about couples who like post about themselves on social media and stuff? What kind of things should they be careful of image-wise, even in their own private time?
Do you know every single time, when I was doing an assignment and I'd have like 5 candidates, and the first thing I would do for each one of those candidates is I'd check all their social media. I would Google their name. I'd look and I'd see what they're putting out there. And if I've seen some really good, like some that you go, I can't believe you'd put that out there. Like really, like if you are in your 20s, and yes, you're at the time of your life, you're going out there partying and you're having a great time, you don't need to document every single thing on Facebook for the world to see. And even your friends could share something that you've shared with them. So you always need to have a sense of decorum. Like, if your mother wouldn't look at it, why would you give it to anyone else? Like, if you can't show it to your mother, why do you need to put it out there on a forum? Because it will come back and bite you years later.
In my defense, my mother is a sex therapist, so I would share with her a lot of things. But as a general rule, most people wouldn't share with their mothers, and I get that. And another thing that I would say personally is don't put your workplace on social media. I don't think your workplace, like, I get that you might want clout for working at some big company, but do that on LinkedIn and maintain a professional stance on the professional social media. But like on your personal, like I've got a different name on my Facebook than I use for my journalist byline so that people can't, they have a harder time finding me because, and I've got quite good security, but I would never put my workplace down on any form of social media unless it was a public form. Do you know what I mean? Like I've got my public workplace journalist Instagram and my personal Instagram where I have all the fun.
Well, that's right. You put, LinkedIn is your professional profile. Instagram and Facebook is your fun and everything else, but still the same rule of thumb. If it can't be for public on the front page of the newspaper, that doesn't mean that you can't have pictures of all your friends partying and having drinks and that kind of stuff. But some people go too far with what they actually have put on there before, and I have seen some things where you go no.
So it's just trying to be your own. Don't let there be any surprises down the line for a future person who has your career in between their thumb and forefinger. Don't give them a chance to go no and take it away from you. So it's your future, the one thing you want in life. It's giving yourself the best chances to get that. Don't trip on these minds along the way.
Don't complain about your company. Don't complain about that on a form saying I hate where I'm working, or post on a day that you call in sick, or those kind of things, because people do look at that.
That's an interesting point, is that if you are dating somebody at work and you both want to take holidays together, or you both want to take a strategic sick day, like that's probably going to get you in a hot bit of trouble as well. And it might be difficult to go on holidays at the same time if you're in the same team, especially because they can't afford to lose two people at once.
Exactly. I mean, there are a lot of industries where having a relationship at work probably would be the thing that would happen, like medical. Or retail, or even the sports, or acting, the arts. So there's somewhere, you're going to meet people, because at the end of the day, that's your profession. And it's not like, if you're a doctor, you might date another doctor, or you might make a nurse. It's not going to really make a difference to any kind of hierarchy, or unless you want to go into hospital administration or something like that.
Well, I even think that that's the thing, that as long as you can still work for the same company potentially and date, but perhaps not be on the same immediate team. Like if you're not in the same specialist area in medicine, or you are in the same specialist area but you're on a different rotation, or you're not, I think it's more difficult. If, for example, if I got into a relationship with somebody at work, if all of my common sense flew out of my brain and I went, it's a really good idea getting into a relationship, I would either ask to be transferred out of that immediate team or think about getting a new job if I was sure that it was a thing. But I just think that being on the same team, like even with my ex and I, Judith, we had issues whereby we were working in slightly different departments but in the same building, and he would occasionally come over to my side of the workplace and go, "Oh, isn't that cute? Look at my little girl working," which really took me down a peg.
Oh my God.
In front of everyone else, except at the time, because I was dumb, I was like, oh my God, he thinks he's proud of me. But now I'm just like, oh my God, everybody in that room would have gone, look at that incapable little thing,
Probably true.
That is, that's a real interesting example, because that is almost like, it's kind of it's kind of putting someone down when it's made to be seen as not putting them down. Look at my little, like, oh, I'm higher and she's not.
Look at my little girl doing her little work, tickety tack on the computer. Like, it's just, in hindsight, I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So everyone in that room now thinks I'm a little, I don't know.
Yes,
it was bad.
And the question I have, it's not, I don't know if you can answer it, Judith. It's a question for the universe. It's how do couples, or like you work all day with your person and then you go home together and then you're with that person again and then the next day and then again. And of course I love and respect and want to be with my partner, but I don't know how some people can go doing it all day and then all night, all day, space. All night, all day, all night. I don't know. Have you come across this, like people working successfully and dating successfully together? Have you come across that much, Judith?
It's a tough one. I mean, we've actually had a few people on the podcast that have had businesses where they're partners and they're working with them all. And even my co-host, Christina, she works with her husband, and they've been working together for quite some time. And you've got to be aware of it. You have to be aware of it and actually work through it and talk about it. And, it's it's a tough. I think it takes a strong person, but it takes two people who can actually, who are confident in themselves, happy for the other person to succeed.
Yes.
That's the other issue I wanted to talk about is professional competitiveness. Now, this is something that I came up against as well, is that when you're in a couple, you have to think about the fact that what happens even if you're on the same level, but you get a bit competitive or you start getting jealous of your partner's success. Like, this is where it all comes back to the fact we're big on communication on this podcast, Judith. We pretty much think that there's no relationship problem that can't be solved by communicating, even if that communication leads to a breakup. But talking about it is going to bring it out into the open instead of it hiding in the shadows. And I just think that you have to be really strong to be able to communicate when you're jealous of something that your partner's doing without just being happy for them. But it's important.
Absolutely. You can be, your natural instinct may be to be competitive. Like if you're both competitive people, like, oh, I want to do as well. I want to get to that level. Oh, but if it's jealousy, then that can be an issue. So you can be competitive with your partner, but not jealous, because you should be happy for them. Mm-hmm. So if they get promoted before you do, then you should be happy for them. Your competitive side would be, I've got to work a little harder and I want to do that too. I want to get there too. What do I need to do? I remember way back, it wasn't with partners, but I just remember way back in my early career, if someone got promoted before me, I wanted to find out what they did. Like, I wanted to know how they did it. Right?
How can I do that?
How'd you do it? Was it, a lot of times it was, increase your networking, increase your contacts, whatever, work a little bit more on projects, something like that. But it was never a case where I was jealous for them, because it was more, oh, okay, that's great. Now, how can I do it? Can you help me? That sort of, but I think with partners and people working in it, it's, if your partner's not confident and you've gotten the promotion and they did it, and that's a problem for them, you can't take it on as your problem. Because that's your career. That's actually their problem that they need to deal with and sort it out. It's not your problem, because
don't make yourself less than because somebody else is frightened by your more than.
Exactly. It's kind of like, running the race slower, waiting for if you're both runners, waiting for your partner to come up. Well, which is not the way. You should be running hard, and hopefully they'll try harder too to catch you. Yeah.
And you can be running hard ahead of them whilst yelling out really lovely, encouraging things from the front. Right. There's nothing to say that you've got to trip everyone up and get there first. You can still be supportive whilst being successful.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Now, Judith, is there anything that we haven't chatted about that you wanted to mention in terms of working together as a couple, or different ways of navigating the workplace?
Look, I think really with relationships in the workplace, it is one of those ones that, I would always be saying to people, just tread very carefully. But if it was me, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't go down that track. But if you can't help it, then find out what the rules of engagement are within your organization, and make sure that when you're at work, it's work. And you need to be aware people will talk. People will talk, and they will. And so you do need to be conscious of how you're being perceived by your colleagues, by your boss, and that it's work. It's not, don't go to lunch, be gone, and all that other stuff, where you never did that before.
Right. Look, this is the part of the podcast where we normally talk about what we've learned, and what you were talking about definitely goes on what some of the lessons I've learned today. If I were to date someone in the workplace again, I would definitely pay more attention to the optics and always think about how anything looks from the outside. And also, I think one other thing that I've learned is that if you are dating someone in the workplace, there can be no hey sweetie or hey honey or anything like that. I wouldn't just stop my PDA or the way I treated them when I walked through the door. The second that we left the house to go to work, I would say that's when we're colleagues and not Like when we step out of our house on a work day, we're colleagues and that's it.
Yep. No sweetie cake pumpkin pie
No.
as you're walking in, none of that. Yeah, they're two pieces of great advice by Judith.
What have you learnt, Tom?
When we were talking about like communicating with and sending photos and all that,
Oh.
my sort of life tip, hot life hack would be like, imagine all of your communication. Imagine that one day they're all going to be read out in a court of law. You should be trying to hit that level of like plausible deniability where all of your all of your communications, emails, texts can be read out in a court of law.
And again, we're not saying just be a pervert in person.
No.
You shouldn't be a pervert
That's
there
right.
either. But at least cover your butt in case something you
Yes.
say is going to be misconstrued.
Yes, so that's a tip, I suppose, is to Judith. I don't know if you've learnt anything on this episode from your own expert advice, but if you have anything to tack on, please do.
Well, the other thing is I'd probably say don't argue via text.
Yeah.
Very
When
good.
you go back and forth, it's going to be, well, one, the other person can't hear the tone.
Or my crying.
Yeah.
That's right. And so therefore it comes out, that's where things, can be later shared or shown. Look what they said to me and look how mean he was and look how, look what she said and everything else.
Right.
And I would just say to people these days, look, you know what? There's something called picking up the phone and having a verbal conversation with someone that goes a long way for any kind of relationship. And whether it's a work relationship or not, but pick up the phone, have the conversation, and really just make sure that, eyes wide open, basically, and you know what you're getting yourself into.
And yeah, the other thing that I wanted to go back and talk about that I learned in terms of if abstinence is not always the answer. If you're Judith, she wouldn't, and I probably wouldn't again. But if you are going to go down that path and you do think that the relationship is more than a fling,
Yes.
ask the rules.
Yeah, do it.
Speak to HR, speak to your boss.
Do it the
talk
right
about
way.
if any transfers need to happen. Sometimes you need to sign contracts to say that, you are in a relationship, but that won't let anything come between your work. There are such a thing as relationship contracts, and they can mandate those.
It's tempting because it's so fun and secretive to be to go to be secret with someone else and to sleep behind the backs of everyone else, but do it right. Probably it'll save you a whole lot of save you some time and a headache in the future. Probably.
And if you break up with somebody,
just here's the deal: if the company, because the company, if two people within an organization, one does the wrong thing, and then they show unwanted affection to somebody who doesn't want them, who then says, "Okay, I'm taking you to court." Legal, I've been harassed, whatever, or even they could wrap it up as anything. Who is going to pay? The company is going to pay. And the company might not even know about it.
Exactly.
It's sort of like,
that's another point that we touched on that I hadn't even really thought of, is that even putting yourself out there and saying, I like you, will you date me? Even if they say no, thank you, that can still present the minefield. That's another thing I learned today, is that even if it's a completely reasonable, I like you, I don't feel the same, and then someone gets promoted, that could be really murky later on.
Absolutely.
Yes. They could actually use that later on to say, I didn't get my promotion because I knocked them back for a date.
Exactly.
And I had this one time, I had to actually be on a panel for this organization. It was a large financial institution, and somebody, they were being interviewed, and they were not strong enough for the role. But that person kept saying, calling out harassment, and the company was all worried about, because they were saying that she was actually saying that this one person was sexually harassing her. And seriously, I know this person was, and there's just not a chance. So they knew it too. Everybody knew it. And I had to go with the panel to interview for this role that they were going for, that they didn't have any of the qualifications, not even like one. and it was a technical role, but they were just kind of like, I'm going to go. And then if I don't get it, then I'm going to say that XYZ, this was the reason. And I actually had to have this company agree. I said, I'll go in and I'll do this interview, but I also want an agreement saying that if this person turns on me, because they're not going to get the job. They weren't capable to get the job. But they were insisting that they were being interviewed like everyone else. And I said, because if they come after me, I'm not going to, it's not my fault.
Yeah, that's right.
Long story short, that person wasn't capable of the role. They did sue the company, and the company settled.
Gee whiz.
And this is the shame of it, because the company, the person was innocent, everything was fine, but the company settled because they did not want to have it in the press.
Yep.
And they didn't want to have, and it's cheaper to settle. And this was a long time ago. This was seriously like 15, 20 years ago. Yeah. It was a long time ago. It was happening then and still happened. But the company didn't, the cost of litigation would have been more.
I guess that's another thing that you need to think of today, is that even if there are situations where, there's no one interested in anyone, just make sure that your butt's covered just in case someone says there was down the track. So make every interaction unimpeachable.
Yes, I suppose in your career path, there's already a litany of traps and things to trip up on, and dating just introduces a whole other bag of those things. Judith, thank you so much for coming on Ghost of Boyfriend's Past today.
Hey, can I just say one more thing?
Please, sure. please, have it go.
No, just one more thing. I just because people might think that these things are when they go wrong are just the women who are going after the guy. It happens where women have gone after guys, and that hasn't been reciprocated. Gay couples, it's happened. It's not down to one sex.
Demographic.
It's not one demographic that's being targeted in workplaces. It's everyone. No. No one.
Humans are universally trash. We're equal opportunist haters on this podcast. Everyone is susceptible to being garbage at some point. So just try to not be garbage human, and then we'll work out. But look, Judith, can you tell us a bit more about your podcast and give your book another plug to round the show off?
Oh, great. Well, Every Step Podcast, and it's everysteppodcast.com. It's basically, it's a career podcast that Christina and I decided to start last year. And we've got speakers from around the globe who've been there, done that, as far as, they're experts. And the requirement was you have to be free to be able to say it like it is. Right. And from a career point of view. And so we don't want what the agenda is. We want people with different views, and we want to be able to respectfully discuss it about, we talk about things like remote working from home or not working from home. Some people love it, some people don't, some, all these different things. And, things like, pronouns, and should that be part of and everybody has a different view and different things. So the idea is that the podcast is a discussion like what we've just had. Not an interview. So we don't bring people on and just have an interview, how did you get there? It's all about a topic of a particular career topic. And then we just deep dive into it. And then if we don't agree, we agree to disagree, and we all go, okay.
Right.
And we try to educate and motivate, really. And so that's been keeping me busy for the last year.
Yeah, so that was Every Step Podcast. Check it out, listeners. If you have any queries or questions as to what people in business and leaders in their profession think about different business topics, and do a deep dive on those. If you've ever wanted to listen to that, or even yell at the podcast. Well, I was going to say radio. We don't listen to radios anymore. But yell at the speaker and agree to disagree with them. Absolutely. We want to promote discussion about career topics.
Yeah, go and give Judith some minutes, please, listeners, my dear readers, as a favour to me. Also, let us know. Have you dated in your career, in your career avenue? Did it work out? Did it not? How did it come undone? If it did, I want to know.
We want the stories. We want, if you've got happy stories, let's hear them as well. If you've got ways where they've worked out and how you navigated that would be really interesting. I also want to know if it blew up in your face.
I want to know also, did you see someone at your work date someone at your work, and did it blow up in their face?
Did you report them to HR? We want all of the stories to do with work. Judith, thank you so much for joining us again. And I'm just going to leave you with one last thought, is that if you have to date somebody at work, my friends, just make sure you do it right, because dear God, I'm here to tell you that when it goes wrong, it's real bad.
Judith.